Okay, welcome to Muslimish Conference 2018. It's lovely to see so many new and familiar faces today. Just a quick announcement and request. When you're exiting the room, please do so from this door here on my left or your right, because we're recording in the back. Also, try not to get in the way of the camera, please. So I'm excited to be your MC for the science portion of today's conference. And it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our first speaker, who is Zarrar Shehzad. Zarrar was born in Pakistan, but grew up in Jersey. He's wrapping up his PhD at Yale with a postdoc at Columbia University. Zarrar never strongly identified as a Muslim until after joining Muslimish. And he enjoys the frank and curiosity-driven discussions that we have in our Muslimish discussions. And he finds that he sees that open conversations are important to detaching ourselves from self-focused opinions and seeing those opinions as one of the many different perspectives within a larger pluralistic society. Sorry, I'm a little tired, so I'm like stumbling on my words. My bad. So, without further ado, please welcome Zarrar Shehzad.
Hi everyone. So what I'll be doing now is giving a welcome address, which I'll keep short, mainly because I don't have that much to say about it. And then I'll give a brief talk related to one theme of Muslimish called pluralism. So to welcome you, just wanted to thank everyone for being here. We had many generous donors that made this event possible. So some of the food that you're having, some of the great speakers that we were able to bring in happened because of some very generous donors. And I wanted to, just in case you're not that familiar with Muslimish, just read the mission statement very briefly, which I think summarizes to some extent the goals of the group. So our mission, if you go to the Muslimish website, is to create a safe, supportive, open-minded environment for the exchange of thoughts and ideas among current and former Muslims. And this might make it a little different from some other groups where not only are we focused on just ex-Muslims, but we're also interested in people who are Muslim and bringing them together, with the goal of fostering a pluralist society that respects the rights of all individuals to live according to their conscience. And we also want to apply the values that we might have here to the rest of the world. And to that end, we hope to abolish blasphemy and apostasy laws that keep people in other Muslim countries from expressing sort of their freedoms. And from a key thing in Muslimish is in other Muslim countries, people are prevented from questioning their faith, from questioning the world around them. And so hopefully we'd like to change that, not just for us, but for people around the world. And so this year, our focus was a little bit different than previous years. Most of the times we end up focusing a lot on religion, which there will be a focus this year too on religion. But we wanted to move away from that into something more about how we're trying to create our own identity in our own community. And then trying to think of, okay, well, what is it? What are the things that we value as individuals and as a community? Not just about religion. And so for that, we're going to have sections about science, where people will be talking about different topics related to science. And also we are interested in the arts. And so if you've seen, there's some great artwork that you can see behind there. And the artwork reflects our appreciation for not just the world that's right in front of us. At least for me, part of the thing that's nice about art is it expresses something that's ineffable, something that exists in our minds about how the world is, and tries to paint that in some picture that we might be able to then understand. And finally, we'll be talking about community and building a better community. And so with that, I hope you go through this conference and get a better sense of what Muslimish is, what our values are, and how we're looking to build a new community. And so I should have worn another hat, so again, I'm taking off this hat for the welcome address, and I'll be putting on this hat for giving a talk now. So I'll switch to that. Just give me a second. So I put a title in the schedule because I didn't actually know what I wanted to speak about, and because I didn't have time to make the talk until sort of the last couple of days. So the talk now, the title is, and it won't change now, is More Than One Way to Skin a Cat, and it's about, I'll focus on emotions and pluralism. And so the sort of broad theme that I'll cover is pluralism, which I mentioned is important for Muslimish. And here I'll be discussing about how we might need to navigate the differences that might exist. So within a pluralist society, there are many different groups. One of the tensions is navigating the differences between groups. So you'll see me like this because normally I'm highly well prepared for my slides, so this time I'm not, so I don't have my presenter notes here. So you'll see me like looking both here and at my cell phone, and my cell phone has my notes. So just bear with me on that. Now here I want to discuss one difference that may not exist necessarily in this room, but reflects divisions that exist in a larger community, which is between faith and reason. And for me, faith ends up being actually a lot about our emotions and our passions. In particular, when you think about faith, faith reflects beliefs, and beliefs themselves are attitudes we have towards things. They're feelings we have about something. So faith really is intertwined with emotions. So instead of talking about faith versus reason, here I'm going to be talking about emotions versus reason. And I'll be suggesting that often, maybe in the discussions we might have, we might overly focus on reason, which is good and reasonable. But sometimes this other aspect, our emotions, are sort of left aside, but they play a critical part in our behavior. And so just the one thing you want to try to do is motivate that this is a really important question, that emotions versus reason, it's really important. And so one thing to do that is you can bring old people on the screen, old philosophers, right? And say, look, these philosophers debated these questions. So Kant was really emphasized that reason was especially important, versus David Hume had a greater emphasis on emotions. And sort of for moral decision making, Hume talked about how reason was the slave of the passions. So Hume sought the preeminency of emotions. And actually in modern day, in fact in psychology at least, David Hume's stuff is actually very relevant for the work that maybe I do, and his philosophy is intended to work well with our worldview. But I think Kant, just generally in science, the ideas of Kant, this idea about reason, the importance of reason, has come through Kant into the scientific world. And I think we can see this importance of reason. I mean, I could have put so many different things on here. One thing I put, sort of a suggestion for a future book club at Muslimish, Stephen Picker's book, Enlightenment Now. It really talks about the importance of reason. When you have rallies, you don't name them the emotion rally, you name them the reason rally. Again, because you're emphasizing the importance of reason. And again, I'm not saying reason is bad, I'm just saying that that's where the importance generally has lay. And so here, in this talk then, I want to contrast that importance that we generally give with an importance towards emotions and how they're relevant to our everyday behavior. And so I'll show just a couple of experiments related to this concept. And so the first one is this Iowa gambling task, where participants are presented 2 decks of cards and a computer screen. They're told that each deck holds cards that will either reward or penalize them. So you can see the white cards are win cards and the blue are loss cards. The goal of the game is to win as much money as possible. The decks differ from each other in the balance of rewards versus penalty cards. Thus some decks, and this will be a key word I'll use, some decks are bad decks, right? And some decks are good decks. And a good deck is one that gives you good reward. A bad deck is one that has not good reward or gives you lots of losses. It makes you lose a lot of money. Okay. And what's interesting about this is that there are certain people with a particular type of brain damage. It's in the orbitofrontal cortex, so if you go to your eyeballs, go right above it, there's this sort of sheet right at the bottom of your brain. And that tends to be damaged. So for healthy people, when they do this task, they keep picking decks. They have no idea what cards there are, but they know each time they're winning or losing money, they can over time figure out what's the good deck. But patients, on the other hand, with damage to this very particular area, actually keep picking the bad deck. And in fact, they'll know like that they're losing money, they'll know that they're picking the bad deck, but they keep making this choice, this bad choice. They somehow have not figured out this connection between what's a good deck, has good rewards, with what choice they should make. One theory about this by Antonio Damasio is called the somatic marker hypothesis. So this idea is that emotions, so now I'm talking back about emotions and how emotions might be important. So emotions reflect bodily states, right? They're these somatic markers. And the way we learn which deck is good or bad is we associate a somatic marker, so the way that your body tends to feel, with a particular deck and the circumstances. So was it good money or bad money? And one thing to note as I'm talking about this, you're not conscious of this. This is all happening underneath your awareness, this feelings that you're getting. And then later on though, when you encounter the deck again, your body has made this association. So if you see a particular deck, you're like, you have this sort of bad feeling, there's changes in your skin conductance response, and which then leads you to say, no, I shouldn't pick this. And so again, emotions here are guiding the decision. Reason in a traditional sense is not. And why is that? Well, reason tends to be slower. You have to deliberate. It's also, interestingly, tends to be limited. So as some of you know, reason will be limited based on the capacity at which you can maintain things in your mind, which tends to be about 3 items. Whereas emotions can be rapid. Emotions can be rapidly used to make a decision. And also, as I was mentioning, emotions can consider lots of data. So those cards, there were so many different cards at deck. It would be hard to remember and reason about it all together. Instead, emotions can clump up all those experiences together into sort of a gut-like feeling. Now, the tidbit here is that emotions and reason, one isn't good, one isn't bad, but instead, they occupy like different job positions. So I told you I was going to talk about pluralism. You can see a hint of it here. So, one person isn't necessarily bad, one person isn't necessarily good. They might occupy different positions in a common, larger goal, just like emotion and reason do. Now I wanted to talk a little bit about what it is about emotions that are important, and it's that they make value judgments. So in this case, when you're saying something was a good deck, you were giving a value to the deck. And I want to make sort of a link here to give you a little story about the trolley problem. And so in the trolley problem, what happens is you have this little trolley that's going along, it's about to kill these 5 people who are on the ground. Many people might be familiar with this. And so the question is that there's a person on the bridge that you can push, and they would die, but in their death, they would stop the trolley and save the 5 people. And so the rational response is to sort of push the person. Just let him go. Yeah, but you don't have enough time. So it's a very specific problem. It's a philosophy problem. So it's very specific. You could also tell the trolley to move or something, but it can't. It's like going really fast. So you have this. So I want to take this problem to try to emphasize the value of emotion and its relation to value, and that's what emotions are very good at, about telling us what's valuable. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you 2 people. You may know these people. You have to choose which one to push off the bridge to save the other people. If you don't choose, both will die. So it's like a Saw-like movie scenario. So you have to push one, right? And so and you don't have too much time. I said 10 seconds, but actually I'm not going to talk about it for that long. The point is that you can't reason about it. You have to make these decisions quickly. You can imagine in your everyday life you can't always reason about things. You have to make decisions sort of quickly. And so these are the 2 people. I'm just going to say, I know what the choice will be. I know. I'm going to be pushed off the bridge, and Nora will be saved. Nora's on the right, on the left. Right? And I can tell you the reasons why. And again, when you're making the decision, you might have a bunch of factors that you're going at. So you might say, oh, well, Nora is younger, so people prefer younger people.
That's not the only reason.
You might say, she has a very good voice for podcasts. Right? So she's very valuable. It's valuable for Muslimish. Zarrar, right? And I can keep going on a list.
You do make us laugh.
She's a very competent, caring person. I'm not really like that. So, we can go on. But notice what we're doing here. In listing these things, we're giving values. Right? So even when I said, she's good for podcasts, that's attaching a value to someone to say, the reason I like this person, I'm not going to throw them off the bridge, is because of this connection I have. It's an emotional thing. Although technically it's sort of rational too. Right? If you want Muslimish to survive, you want the person to be better for Muslimish to be alive, right? So I think the point here is that when we make these decisions, so you're deciding between the two of us, and you have a quick decision, it might be even that, I like this person more. But what does that liking mean? That liking that person reflects a whole set of history that you had with the person, a whole set of qualities that you learned about the person. So again, emotions use lots and lots of data to try to make a quick, efficient judgment about value. And to make decisions like this that we'll have at the end of today. Now to connect this with the Iowa gambling test that I had before, if you actually have people who have brain damage in this OFC, and imagine you're picking the bad deck, so you're trying to push the person who you think is less valuable off the bridge, people with this brain damage will not be able to do that. They won't be able to use previous experiences to decide, who's more valuable. One other example I want to bring that's interesting for me is that this seems irrational. It's like if I know someone for a longer period of time, why I might not push them off the bridge, for instance, just because of the amount of time that I've known them. But that itself is a value judgment, right? I value this person because of the amount of time I've had. But in some sense, there's also something more interesting about that. You need that value judgment also because if you push someone off the bridge that you've known for like 20 years, what does that say about you as a person? What does that say about you as a community? What does that say about, because in communities, loyalty and these other things play an important part. And so those types of things, like loyalty and those social connections, arise partly through emotion. And the point that I'm making there is they're important for our everyday life. So emotions help accrue information across many sources and define value of a thing or a person. And this allows us to make adaptive, real-time decisions. And just note here that I'm only describing emotions, one aspect of emotions, but in fact, there's lots of different things that you can talk about. And then, I'm not sure what's the time like at this point? Is anyone timing anything?
Oh my God, I forgot the time. It was just really.
So the next person we'll time the next person. Okay, this is perfect. This is perfect. So okay, I'm almost done actually. So
Allahu Akbar. Sorry. Not here bombing. Hi, ma'am. Go in the back.
did you want that part?
Oh, I could. Come this way.
Yeah, I think that side might be.
There's another entrance right there, maybe.
Or go around there.
Community, speaking of which.
Yeah. I don't know, I should wait longer. So the next part is just about applying these ideas to maybe in everyday conversations or everyday scenarios that we might have. So I think the important part that I wanted to point out here is that we might talk a lot about the importance of reason, but here I talked about the importance of emotions, and I talked about emotions as being values. So when we look at things, what we'll need to think about in thinking about other people is what are their values versus what are their reasons versus what are their actions, and sort of tease these things apart. And by teasing that apart, it can help us then better align ourselves with the values of others. And just a note that I wanted to make is that values can be actually fairly hard to change, right? And so based on everything I just said, that might make sense, right? So And the reason for that is I mentioned that if emotions guide our value-based decisions, and emotions reflect massive amounts of experiences that come together to make a quick decision, then it would make sense that one conference or one conversation wouldn't change those emotions. It wouldn't change those values. Because values aren't about more the rational end, they're more about the emotional end. And so you'll need lots and lots of exposures, lots of interactions with people in order to change all those experiences they've had that their emotions are based on, to sort of change the values they might have. So it's just, the reason that that happens is because we're just designed in that way. I guess that's one way I think about it. And then this is the sort of least organized part of the talk that I had. But I was beginning to think about different conversations I might have with people. So one example, I had a conversation with people about drinking or not, and these are Muslim people talking about drinking. And other conversations I've had in, say, within Muslimish is how important, how relevant or irrelevant is religion. So some people, even within Muslimish, will say that religion should totally go, and some people, like myself, are more interested in context and how that role that plays in the decisions that people make. So I'll talk about this example, I think, and maybe leave the second one. So for the drinking thing, it was interesting to have a conversation with friends, and they were talking about, you know, the value in Islam that you don't drink at all, and then they started talking about other things like how, you know, it can make you a better person, you're not drunk or trash, you're able to make conscious decisions, you don't need alcohol, and they were saying sort of all these different things. And I think for me, it was not that, I mean, I don't even drink that much. For me, actually, for some people, I think if there was no alcohol in the world, they would try to find it. For me, I don't think, I'm not that obsessed with it. But I do drink, and I don't think I'm necessarily a bad person for drinking. And I don't actually think that it's the bad decision to make. This isn't to say, though, that what my friends were saying was wrong. Right? But it was this idea that, so in the second line I have this idea, and I feel like it's still hard for me to talk about it, because we often talk about right versus wrong. Whereas in sort of a pluralist type society, it's like there's more than one way to skin a cat. So if your goal is to lead a good life, to be a good person, sort of thing, you might think not drinking, according to Islam, leads you that way. In my mind, at least, there's many different ways to be a good person. And I know many people who drink. Some people don't drink that much, they drink a little. I for instance, really like wine, I like to drink wine. And I think, it's not even that it makes me a bad person, but I view drinking not as like, oh, I'm gonna go off the deep end, but as an experience. So for me, drinking is the same way as it would be like eating food that I really like. It's like an appreciation for it. And so the point there then is that this is a different model. So what I'm describing is something that works for me, and it's good, and I think it helps me to lead a good life, but it's not necessarily the only way. And I feel like sometimes when I talk to people, maybe my family who are Muslim or other people who are Muslim, I navigate this tension. And the tension is both expressing my value, to say I think what you're saying is okay, but I should be able to do what I want to do. But also this tension of when people talk about not drinking, sometimes I feel like if they're Muslim, what they're actually saying is, this is my identity. So if I criticize that identity, which I'm not doing, but it might be construed that way, then it criticizes their base values. And so that conversation can be sort of hard. How do I say that, no, I don't want to do this, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do this, and to allow me to do what I want to do. Anyway, I feel like I'm sort of going into tangents here, again, because I'm still sort of thinking through this. But the point is that if we can think more about, well, what is it that people value, and not necessarily the reasons that they give, then we might get a better sense at where the conversation is and what's important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Zarrar. That was definitely the most enlightening, but also hilarious speech so far tonight. I say that with love, a lot. And I wouldn't push you off the bridge, but I also couldn't push Nora.